Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Public Works Committee meeting for October 30th, 2023. Niagara Region and Grimsby are situated on treaty land. This land is steeped in the rich history of the First Nations, such as the Haudenosaunee, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. There are many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people from across Turtle Island that live and work in Niagara today. The Regional Municipality of Niagara and the Town of Grimsby stands with all Indigenous peoples, past and present, in promoting the wise stewardship of the lands on which we live. All right, we'll call the meeting to order. Are there any disclosures of interest? Seeing none, move on to our next agenda item, the approval of the agenda. Can I get a mover and a seconder to approve the agenda, please? Councillor Davoli and Councillor Korstanzi. Resolved that the agenda for the October 30th, 2023 Public Works Committee meeting be approved. All in favor? That's carried. Next, we have receipt of the previous minutes, the September 25th, 2023 minutes. Can I get a mover and a seconder to receive the previous minutes, please? Member Rady, Member Murphy. Resolved that the minutes for the September 25th, 2023 Public Works Committee be received. Any questions or comments? All in favor? It's carried. All right, there are no delegations, but there is a short presentation that will accompany report DPW 2325, so we will consider that along with the report in the report section. Next, we have item 7.1, DPW 2324, Public Works Department Update, Fall of 2023. Can I get a mover and a seconder to receive the consent report DPW 23? Got Member Smink and Councillor Davoli. Resolved that the Public Works Committee hereby approves the following items and the various consent items be approved on the recommendation as contained therein. That report DPW 2324, Public Works Department Update, Fall of 2023, dated October 30th, 2023, be received for information. All in favor? That's carried. Of course, if there are any specific questions that people think of after they, upon reflecting, I'm sure Mr. Wortman would be happy to answer those questions for you via email. Discussion reports. Next, we have some discussion reports to be considered, starting with report DPW 2323 on the removal of public interest on 4 Betts Avenue. Can I get a mover and a seconder to get report DPW 2323 on the floor for discussion, please? Member Murphy, seconded by Councillor Korstanji. Thank you. Would staff like to start us off on that one? Mr. Wortman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the purpose of this report is to obtain council's authorization to provide direction to our lawyers to clear land title of the property located at 4 Betts Avenue. Currently, the private lands have a description on title noting, in quotes, the interest of the municipality. Owner of that property has reached out to the town through their lawyers to ask if this title could be removed from the description to avoid any uncertainty with the land title going forward. We've enclosed a map which shows the proposed property ownership within the Grimsby Beach area, and that includes 4 Betts Avenue. Just for information, that map was prepared as part of the Grimsby Beach land use planning study based on the property records for the area. The owner has agreed to pay all costs for the application to amend the title within the Land Registry Office, including all town's legal fees, and the appropriate application documents are appended to the report, and I'm happy to take any questions.
All right, any questions for Mr. Wortman? Seeing none, just quickly, because I've never experienced this before, the interest of the town, is that a common term? Because I've never seen that before, and how does this process arise? How does it get to that point?
Sorry, through you or to you, Chair, Mr. Chair. I'll get that someday. So the question was basically, how does that occur? How does that arise? Understanding through the legal registration process at one point in time, it must have indicated that there was a public interest in that property, or municipal interest in that property. But again, we've reviewed it and determined that there is no public interest in that property. So they've essentially asked us to remove it. How it got there, I'm not sure.
Okay, so historically, it was never owned by the municipality, and because we've discussed this before, but there are a lot of gray areas in the Grimsby Beach area where, you know, things kind of get moved, boundaries get moved, people build. So that wasn't the property of the town of Grimsby. That's kind of just being taken over by somebody else, just making sure.
Yes, again, through you, Mr. Chair. So going back to the background is, you know, it was originally planned as a plan of subdivision from the 1800s for the Methodist campground, and it showed land along the waterfront, and they described it as Victoria Terrace, and that's where they came up with that. Some of the properties are actually addressed Victoria Terrace, but the current title of the lands are as identified on our map.
Thank you. Any further questions for Mr. Wortman? Seeing none. Resolve the report DPW 2323 for 4 Betts Avenue removal of public interest dated October 30th, 2023 be received, and that Public Works Standing Committee recommends council endorse the Director of Public Works to assign documentation releasing the public interest as it relates to the land owned by the homeowner of 4 Betts Avenue, Grimsby, Ontario. All in favor? That is carried. Next, we have DPW 2325, an update on Phase 1 of the Strategic Parking Management Study. Can I please get a mover and seconder to get this item on the floor for discussion? Member Smink and Councillor DeVoli. Thank you. I'll turn it over to staff for the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm just going to hand it over to Michael Palumba. He's our Senior Transportation Engineering Technologist, and he's been the project lead on this file, and he's going to run you through a quick presentation just to update you on Phase 1 of our parking management study. Michael?
All right. Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. So I'm here tonight to provide an update on Phase 1 of our parking study. I'm just going to quickly kind of run through this presentation. This presentation, it was accompanied also with the summary report that was included with the staff report. If you can go to the next slide, please. So in this presentation, we're just going to hit on four areas, provide a quick project overview, outline the public and stakeholder consultation that was completed, talk a little bit about the data that was collected and the methodology that was used, and then finish off with the key findings that we were able to determine through this process. Next. So this study was initiated in late 2022, and it came about as because we've been dealing with a fair amount of concerns and issues regarding parking in our commercial areas in town. So the idea was that now that we have some bigger projects and some interesting things on the go, it was time to initiate something to look at what we have going on and see if we can identify if there's any needs or opportunities that are in these areas that we can take advantage of. The town retained R.J. Burnside and Associates as the successful consultant on the project. The goals were aimed at looking at how we can ensure that the town provides a sustainable amount of municipal parking, and with that we can look at hoping to support vision of the public realm, economic development, accessibility, and also look at how we can improve other modes of traffic such as cycling and pedestrian activity in those commercial areas. So the two areas in question are the two main, as I said, the two main commercial areas, which are downtown Grimsby and the surrounding downtown network, and then also Grimsby on the Lake, which is the new up-and-coming commercial area in the West End. The study is broken up into two phases. Phase one is mainly regarding gathering all the background information and doing the data collection and identifying some of the issues or the needs or the opportunities that we have available. This included, like I said, the public engagement portion of it, stakeholder engagement portion of it, reviewing all of the background policies and inventory that we have, and then also doing some quick analysis of where we stand. The second phase of the project is where we'll dive into developing that strategic plan based on all of the findings that we have from phase one. That phase is currently underway, but it will be the next piece of that will come along after this. So to next one. So for the public engagement portion of it, we ourselves and our consultant went about this by having both public and stakeholder engagement. The stakeholder engagement was completed through meetings with the downtown business stakeholders, which included business owners, DIA members, and as well in the Grimsby on the Lake area, same manner where we were meeting with business owners, but also condo board representatives as well. We also did public engagement through the form of online surveys. We have a project page on our Let's Talk Grimsby web site, and through there we hosted several surveys for both residents and employees in these areas to get, and those surveys have been open throughout the duration of the project. So we've been able to get information coming in throughout the duration of that. The key moments were having those two stakeholder engagement meetings, because we were able to really to speak with the representatives from the areas to see what's going on a day-to-day basis, and really get down to really find out what's going on and what the issues are, and whether they're perceived issues, whether they're actual issues, whether they're things that we hadn't even thought of looking into. So it was really worthwhile to be able to get everybody in a room and discuss these things. The next portion is the data collection. So this was done through multiple different methods. Our consultant was able to make use of both in-person vehicle counts, as well as utilizing some technology such as drone footage to be able to do parking surveys over a larger area, and it's a lot more cost effective than doing having people on the ground doing counts every hour. So through this process, we had the two areas surveyed on multiple different occasions. In the downtown area, we were looking at, in downtown and in Grimsby on the Lake, we were looking at both municipal and public supply, as well as some of the key private sites as well. For example, in the downtown area, we know we have two large municipal lots, but there's also a few large private lots, and residents and visitors of the areas kind of disperse as they will over all of it. So we wanted to make sure that we incorporate everything we can, and to get a holistic picture of what's happening in the area. Through all this data collection, we were able to develop an analysis and determine what the utilization is in the area. The graphic that you see here is an excerpt from our phase one report, and this is just wanted to show kind of how this data is being processed and then presented back in a way that is easy to see where the trends are and where people are where visitors are parking when they come and visit, for, in this example, the downtown core. Some of the key findings that they had were that the overall municipal parking is currently sufficient to accommodate the existing demand. Even in cases of the farmers market where we have, in the downtown where we have the street closed, that additional capacity or that additional demand that would normally be on Main Street was able to be absorbed into the surrounding area. And that one of the other key findings is that the off-street municipal lots that surround, say, the downtown are not as well utilized as the ones that are right surrounding Main Street, which goes to show that people would like to park closer, walk less, have less of a walk when they're visiting the area. In the next slide, in the Grimsby on the Lake area, similar finding. The existing demand can be accommodated with the existing municipal supply. There are, however, most of the issues that are going on in this area have to do with some of the current restrictions and the availability of longer-term parking. So, for example, if employees are working in the area, the ability for them to park the vehicle for a longer duration is not as, those parking spaces are not as available as the short-term parking spaces are. Okay, and next slide. So the key findings that we have, or the key takeaways from this, in downtown Grimsby, one of the big things that we have is that we want to optimize the existing parking supply that we currently have. This can be done in a number of different ways. One example is to relay out some of the existing municipal lots to create some more spaces through efficiencies. The other way that we could work towards this is to try and spread that demand out to some of the underutilized municipal lots in the surrounding area. So, for example, trying to encourage people to, instead of wanting to park and walk 1 minute, maybe walk 5 minutes. In doing so, we would need to make sure that we have adequate active transportation network, so that people feel more comfortable to park a little bit further away. Some of the other items are to provide dedicated loading zone. Right now, we don't have a dedicated loading zone in the downtown area. This causes some issues where when some businesses get deliveries, they could be basically parking wherever they can find a spot, or they're parking in municipal spaces, or maybe parking illegally. So having a dedicated spot would be, or spots would be beneficial. So that way we avoid any of those issues. Identifying areas for suitable long-term parking. So this is similar to in the Grimsby on the Lake area, having some more spaces for the employees of downtown to be able to park for longer periods of time, instead of not have to worry about any restrictions that we have in place. Enhancing accessible parking, and then also develop a private enforcement bylaw that would help business owners address concerns regarding unauthorized vehicles parked on their property. So how can we work together with the businesses to ensure that the lots are operating functionally and efficiently? Next slide. So in phase 2, we'll be looking at, and then, so some of the items that our consultant has identified is that, sorry. Sorry, I'm on the wrong page here. Yeah, okay. So Phase 2 should explore removing parking spaces along Main Street to focus on other pedestrian-focused amenities. So this is tying into our Downtown Reimagine project. So as part of this is looking at how the current parking situation is. Is there opportunities to increase the amount of pedestrian space in the area? And if we did, how would that affect our existing parking supply? Based on what we know, that there is available capacity in the area, so if there was more pedestrian space provided, that could be absorbed. In some of our conversations with stakeholders, there was a fair amount of support for the farmers market, in that business owners do enjoy when the road is closed for that event, as it helps to drive more foot traffic into their businesses. So they are supportive of keeping that event going on, and potentially even having more similar events on the street. And next slide. In the Grimsby on the Lake. So this one here, some of the key findings we had were that in the existing developments, such as Lake House off of Winston Road there's a lot of competition between visitors of the residential units and the visitors of the commercial units. Currently, that's all controlled privately, so the town doesn't have any authority to do any enforcement on there. One option, though, is looking at how we can work with those business owners and the condo boards to try to resolve some of those issues, and that could be developed through a potential private parking enforcement bylaw, where the town takes on the responsibility of enforcing parking restrictions and ensuring that those shared spaces remain open, or they remain available for whoever needs visitors of the site. But that would require some further conversations. And then the other big one would be to have, there is a need for some longer-term parking spaces for employees of the area. This area is growing significantly, and as more and more of these developments come on board, there's going to be more people working down there. The town needs to work to try to find a suitable solution to allow for more long-term parking. Next. And that's the end of the presentation. So I'll open it up there for any questions if anybody has.
All right, I've got Councillor Howe first.
Oh, you got to push the right button. Damn, you're good, lady. Through you, Chair. Michael, a couple questions if I can. I'm going to bounce around a lot. They refer to a drone up for 8 hours. Was that on one day, or was that over a certain number of days at different hours? I'll tell you what, I'll rattle off a couple other questions if I can. But that's just the drone. One other number that really, I guess I should say is surprising, but it doesn't. You know, we had 69 responds on the online survey. 69. I mean, that's, I'm here to tell you, you get 69 people complaining in one day down there. It just doesn't matter. So hopefully, with the new communications person, we can try to get our message out, put a bit more of a hook, but 69 just, and then they question, well, why is council making decisions? They don't listen. Well, goodness gracious, there's just 69. It really rocked me. The idea of permitting for employees, okay, excellent idea, and if whoever came up with it, so often they don't know, and if there's education, and that's, I think, a good alternative. There's comments on, when the market's there, about, the parking being able to accommodate the demand. But I'm here, I know, I kind of live in the general area. There's just a whole lot of people walking, carrying bags, coming back from the farmer's market. It'd be interesting to see, what the perimeter is of the catchment area, where there were majority of the customers. Because a lot of them do walk, therefore no necessity for the car. But, it's a good pickup, and it's got to be understood. We get to that point, and there's quite a bit in here, and we've all railed about it when it comes to parking and apartment spaces and the pressures to bring it down to 0.7 or something. Well, anything that we see here shows that, and it says in somewhere that this municipality, like a lot of outlying municipalities, we're dependent on the cars. We use the cars. You got to have cars. And there's a lot of, if there's two people working, most times, there's going to be a second vehicle. Because it's not like you're just going to be able to walk to work. And so are we making mistakes? Does this give us some credibility for the official plan to jog the numbers? But, it's just not being listened to or accepted. I got a son that lives downtown Toronto. It's no problem at all. He doesn't need a car. But out here, it's a little bit difficult to walk all those distances. And done. And those are just comments. And Michael, we don't have to defend it. If I can just, this is, I think, a good report. I think they've covered a lot. But people have to understand there's no decisions made on what we've got in front of us. People got a whole lot more opportunity to talk. Everybody's got ideas. Are they workable ideas? Not necessarily, but they are ideas, and from that little germ, things grow. So it's, but a good start. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Member Rady?
I do. Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good report, Michael. Lots of detail. One thing I did notice from Appendix, I guess we're related in another life right now. Maybe we can get Councillor DeVoli just kind of patrol in the back. One of the things I noticed in the Appendix A, which was a lot more detailed and obviously not quite as much of a delight to read as the PowerPoint, is two things. Action for council, and I think Councillor Howe brought it up. The car dependent 1.25, the car dependent 1.5, the car dependent 2.0, and I saw that we compared our data. This is an issue that's gone on. Even on last council, there were some almost knockdown battles about the number of parking spots that a place has to have. And I did read in your report that the garage counts as one, which may surprise a lot of people who've got it full of junk, right? There's no room for a car to go in, but that's not really our issue. That's up to them. That does count as one. I think council and the councillors here tonight, you can't run from this one. We're going to have to tackle this somehow with planning and building, because I think Councillor Howe is correct, and it's in the report. We're a little more spread out. We do not have the infrastructure that Toronto or Montreal or have with moving people around, right? We're stuck with this area of parking, and this really screams out at it. I did have just a kind of a question about, we do have a lot of overflow to GBF, TD, and Food Basics. Obviously, we must have a good relationship with these guys. There's liability issues. Are they all right with this when they have this overflow? Do you know?
Yeah, so through you, Mr. Chair, we didn't have any direct communications with those sites. They weren't present at our stakeholder meeting. However, we do have some historical understanding that they are not supportive of their parking being used for public purposes, right? That being said, that's where this the discussion comes in about perhaps reaching out to some more of these businesses downtown to discuss options for public-private partnerships to do some private enforcement and come up with a way to ensure that the parking that is downtown is being used properly. We have restrictions in the proper places. If there is an opportunity to have some shared parking, which we currently do with some of the private businesses down there, is there opportunities to expand that? Is there other opportunities that we can look into? But ultimately, we have to do some further outreach. Right?
Brings me to my final point, which is, why would we even want to get involved in bylaw management here, like voluntarily? I know that Henry's crew is stretched pretty thin already. I live in an area that's very, very high violation of traffic, and they can barely keep up. I also know they spend a lot of time down at the other end of town, the West End, because I've talked to them about it, And so when we have a small group of people managing bylaw already, why would we want to get involved in a skirmish with condominium corporations and companies in the West End? It seems to me like the town's asking for trouble here. We already have enough trouble with parking. Let's not say, well, let's volunteer to police this. No, that's just my comments. Thanks.
Thank you, Member Rady. I've got Councillor Cristanchi and then Councillor Davoli.
Thank you, through Chair. Just a couple comments. Have we thought of an NRT drop-off pickup spot downtown? I know we're talking about a loading zone, but we might encourage more people to take NRT if there's a specific drop-off point, and it might be easier for NRT. The other thing was bike racks. I know it seems like a simple thing, but less people ride their bikes because there's nowhere to actually park your bike, to lock up your bike in a safe spot downtown. I believe there's one maybe on private property, but I don't think the town actually has any, or the public doesn't know about them. And I'm just wondering if you considered the overflow from the funeral home parking at certain times. I'm not sure if it's within the study areas, but I did notice that there, one time when I went, there was quite a bit of overflow and it all went into the municipal lot. And I know it would depend on time and how many people, but it was my grandfather's funeral. We had a considerable amount of people, and it was we parked everywhere. I couldn't even find a parking spot. So I just wondered if those circumstances are taken into consideration as well.
Yep, through you, Mr. Chair. So for the first couple points about the NRT and the bike racks, so those are items that we are considering through the Downtown Reimagine project. This is more. This project will provide some recommendations, but ultimately items like that would be we're dealing with a separate area, but they are actively being considered. As for the overflow, it is something that that specific example is not something that we've looked at yet, but the situations where there would be a significant increase in demand into these areas is being considered, and how we deal with that is to be determined, right? Which it could be something such as specific parking restrictions. So if there was overflow parking and there was increased demand, those people who parking there would be subject to those restrictions, and then ultimately it would come down to enforcement. So But those are rare events that are not the everyday occurrence, so it's hard to plan. It would be hard to plan for that. It's more so we want to make sure that on an everyday, on a regular day, how the site should function and function efficiently.
Thank you, through Chair. Thank you. I do understand, like, the bike racks and stuff are small things and later, but if we're taking into consideration parking, the two are so related, because more people would ride bikes if there was bike racks, so then it affects the parking that's there now. As for the funeral home parking, yeah, it's rare, but it might not be rare, because it could be every day, twice a day, right? So it's one of those, you know, maybe it's really big one day, but it could really be affecting every single day.
Thank you. Councillor Davoli.
Chair DeFlavio, a question to our staff then. And of course, every good report starts with good data gathering. And so can you just explain or clarify for me the time period over which the drone went along, where the spaces were counted and so on? And I guess my ultimate question related to that is, does it take into account wintertime, when snow begins to get pushed and takes over parking spots and so on? So we'll start with, could you just explain the time period over which the study was conducted? And then I guess the second part of my question has to do with the effect of winter and snow on our parking spots.
Yeah, through you, Chair. So the data collection periods are done for peak hour times, typically over an 8-hour period during a day, on a weekday, and then anywhere from a 4 to 6 hour period on a weekend. We had our consultant conducted multiple days of data collection over that time. On both weekdays and weekends. We did data collection in December of 2022, and then other days throughout the spring and the summer. So we were trying to capture all the different different seasonal trends that we have, as well as looking at a weekday versus a weekend. Because these are commercial areas, you know you can have, it's not going to be typical of, it may not be typical the way a normal commuter road would be. And then in addition to that, our consultant also conducted a number of spot surveys. So going out at just some random times throughout the study to kind of confirm the data that we're getting, to ensure that we didn't have an irregularly high demand day, or a day where just nobody came down. So we have all of those to kind of back up the data as well, and ensure that it's as accurate as can be.
Thank you.
And oh, sorry, yeah, the other part was about snow. So that was, as we were doing the winter counts, that's also taken into consideration. So our consultant was able to make some notes about what they saw when they were out there with regards to the plowed areas and how that affected the existing parking.
Thank you. I have just a few comments. So with respect to the loading zones, when you look at a picture of our downtown area specifically, almost every business has access at the front and the back, right? The front because many of them back front onto Main Street, the back because many of them back onto the public and public/private parking lots that are behind them. So, so explain to me your thinking that it would be, or our consultant's suggestion that perhaps it would be good to have loading zones on Main Street. Would that not take away from all those who like to park close? And does that not kind of run contrary to the fact that almost all the businesses have access through the back to actually get product into their business? Perhaps you could just elaborate on that and clarify it for me.
Sure, yeah, through you, Chair. Maybe I'll clarify. The locations of the loading areas haven't been confirmed yet. It's just, we want, with our consultant, we're looking at different options. So that could mean an area designated on Main Street in the downtown area. It could mean something on a side street it was still within close proximity. It could be in the lots in behind. So that's something that we are still investigating and will be brought forward as part of phase 2. And it's the same thing in the West End, in the Grimsby-on-the-Lake area. Right now, because there are, it's still under development, so it's hard to identify a single area. So like I said, we're still working through that.
My last question, or maybe it's really just a comment. One of the things in our business that we always tried to encourage, and we had a very large parking lot beside our building. We always, when new people started with us, on day one, I used to walk them around the parking lot and encourage them to park as far away as possible from the doors. You know, trying to emphasize that leave the closed spots for the customers who come, for those who are disabled and so on, for the delivery trucks, that the farther you park away, the less possibility there is of a delivery truck clipping the back of your car or of someone quickly going in and out and so on, right? But most importantly, it's good customer service, right? To have the business, the owners and the employees park as far away as possible and to leave all the close spots for your customers. And so I do like the beginnings of the thoughts here that, you know, perhaps the employees of the businesses, you know, could even have designated spots at the back of the lots or could have passes or something, and to really try and encourage good customer service, and that includes leaving the spots open closest to the doors for the customers, right? I realize that does run contrary to all of us who would like to park close and run in and out, or who like to park close. And you know, there's lots of reasons, even the staff did, you know, leaving late at night, they like to be in a spot that's close rather than walking out into the farther reaches of a parking lot. And I get all those other reasons. But truly, I think anything that a business can do to encourage their employees to park farther away and leave the close spots for the customers is promoting customer service. And if we can help them in some way, happy to do so.
Thank you, Councilor Woolley. Member Spink.
Through you, Mr. Chair. I did want to wait because several people asked questions that I was going to ask. And I have one kind of main focus that I wanted to ask you guys about the study. I think this is really valuable information, data that can lead into a lot of decisions. And I do see decisions about potential, you know, time limits on parking, potential paid parking, although I think I'd like to have a discussion about that. Parking bylaws and enforcement and wayfinding and other sort of ancillary. The one area I really wanted to look at in detail is the implications of the findings for parking on Main Street, particularly because that's going to impact the vision of what the cross-section and the layout will be for Main Street through the downtown reimagined. Okay, so all of my questions are going to be kind of focused on that. The first one is timeline of phase 2, and will we be able to have the recommendations in the right time for the visioning for downtown?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So timeline, phase 2 is currently underway. We are expecting the completion of the phase 2 report in mid-November. As part of phase 2, there will also be a public consultation, which will occur sometime between mid-November and the end of November. And then there will be one final presentation to council that will bring forward all of the recommendations and the recommended management plan and strategies. So all that information will be shared as it comes in, and The one other thing I forgot to mention before was the actual Phase 1 report that accompanies all of this will be made public as well on our project page. So that, and as soon as the Phase 2 report is completed, will also be moved on there, and there will be time for consultation and further discussion about all the recommendations. As for it lining up with Downtown Reimagine, the goal that we have is to make sure that those two projects are working closely together, and that way we can time it so the recommendations from this project feed into the final determination of the concepts or the preferred plan for Downtown Reimagine.
So I'm seeing probably January, latest February, that we might get that Phase 2 report so that it ties in. I'm looking at this timeline in terms of detailed design.
Sorry, the Phase 2 report for this project? No, the Phase 2 report will be completed in November, this 2023.
I heard you saying that the public consultation is going to be in November. That's not going to be part of the Phase 2 report? No.
Sorry, yes. We'll have a draft report for Phase 2 completed in early November, and then we'll go to public consultation, and then it'll be revised, and the final presentation that we provide to council at sometime around the end of November or early December will be of the final Phase 2 report. Yeah.
Okay, so that timing works. I see I'm very excited about the possibility of removing parking from Main Street, primarily because I've seen it in other communities and how that frees up public realm for pedestrians, for cyclists, for event spaces, and I think there's a real opportunity there. But I do anticipate that the downtown businesses may have a lot of pushback. So I want to make sure that the data on this is very firm, and some of the questions that were asked about the timing of when the data was taken is really important. You had noted that there had been a study of the duration of parking along Main Street, and I'm not sure that I saw the findings of that. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, through you, Chair. Yes, we did do duration. We did do data collection for duration. I can let me just pull up. Sorry. Just want to be accurate here.
Member Spink, perhaps you could explain what you mean while we're waiting for Mr. Palumbo.
I know that in many other communities, they found that employees having longer-term parking can end up using the parking right on Main Street. And if even a third of the spaces on Main Street are taken by long-term employee parking, I don't think we can consider that in terms of usefulness for the businesses themselves. So I wanted to see what that impact would be.
Yeah, so through you, Mr. Chair. So based on what our consultant had noted, that the majority of cars that were parked along Main Street were very short term, between 0 and 30 minutes. And then the next highest one was 30 to 60 minutes. So there was the vast majority of cars were under an hour being parked on the road. There was some instances where you have people parked for longer periods, and there's also some instances that were found where cars were moved from spot to spot. So they might have only been parked for 20 minutes in this spot, but then moved to another spot for another 30 minutes. But overall, it was a quick turnover in the Main Street portion.
And then finally, I know that if this summary is, publicized, some people are going to look at the numbers that say 107%, 113%, and they'll, like, how can that be? And I think I know the answer, but if you could explain that to us, that would be helpful.
Yes, sorry. Through you, Chair. So in that situation there, that could be due to illegal parking. So vehicles that are potentially parked in between spaces or not in an official dedicated space. So.
Thank you, Member Smink. Member Murphy? Actually, Mr. Wortman, was there something that you wanted to, we're good? Okay. Member Murphy?
Through you, Mr. Chair. I found it a very interesting report. I just have a couple of little specific things that are of interest. You did not find any objections from the merchants about the market, people parking on, say, Food Basics parking lot and stuff like that, that you seemed to indicate that they were okay with that? Oops.
Through you, Chair. So we unfortunately didn't have a representative from that site at our stakeholder meeting, so there wasn't much discussion of the public parking in that area. From our just internally our knowledge of the situation, I don't think we've had any complaints that have come in about people parking in there. Because it is a private site, they're able to enforce it as they see fit. So if we're not getting any complaints, we can assume that it's been functioning, or it's been functioning acceptable for them. The feedback that we got from the stakeholders that we did meet with was that overall, the presence of the market is a positive for them, as it does generate some more foot traffic, especially for the restaurants in the area, so they can get more people walking by who can pop in, get something to eat, and go back out. But that was about that was the main sense of the feeling towards that.
Sorry, just to add to that, the other thing we noticed too is the private parking lots, specifically Food Basics and the GBF and TD lots, their peak utilizations in the 50s, 60s range. So, which would imply that they're not being fully, they're not full. So I think the pressure on those businesses, they're not getting complaints from their customers saying we're not able to park. So I think if you saw those rates higher, then there might be more pressure, more complaints coming, which would filter back to us.
I found it interesting that one of the complicating factors over at Grimsby on the Lake is the fact that the condo boards really don't talk to each other much. And I just had a couple of questions there. How are the condo spots enforced?
Through you, Chair. Currently, they're privately enforced, so the condo boards choose how they wish to do it.
Oh, have to press the button here. Just explain a little bit more about cash in lieu.
Sure. So a cash in lieu policy is basically a way for a development to be able to receive relief from the town's parking zoning requirements for parking spaces by paying price per spot to receive a reduction in that rate. And then that money that the town takes in would be used to fund providing additional municipal supply or supporting the parking infrastructure.
Thank you. I have a few questions as well. So everybody's had their chance. So how is peak defined? Is it the 8-hour period? Because, for example, the Balsam parking lot says 71%, but if you go in there sometimes, some parts of the day, it's pretty close to 100%. The parking lot behind CIBC, for example, that lot back there. So does the study talk about those lots reaching full, like reaching their maximum, or close to full, where there's 1 or 2 spots left? So how is that peak achieved, defined, and how are those, individual peaks assessed? Because each of those parking lots might have a different peak time that through
Mr. Chair, so the peak is the observed peak. So, yeah, so the data that we have that was collected, so there's averages for the utilization, but there's also the peak is looking at what is the worst case that's been observed, yeah.
Thank you. I have some concerns about the inclusion, and I understand that for study purposes, we need to include private lots. But it's important to remember that each of those lots is designed for that site. So the Food Basics, that plaza parking is designed for when that plaza is being utilized at its maximum. That's the amount of parking that is required in that spot. The GBF was designed when it was still, the grocery store, but again, designed to handle parking on that site when it's at its maximum. And I would argue that TD is not even adequate for what it's used for, because quite often when you go to the TD parking lot, it's full and people have to use the GBF parking. So I have multiple concerns about the inclusion of those, and I understand from a study purpose, you have to include those. But I don't think that from a what does the town need perspective, it is accurate to consider private parking, because tomorrow, the Food Basics Plaza could come to us and say, we want to redevelop this property. We want to build whatever on this property. It could be fenced off. They could put a gate up. It's a private property, and they can make it so that you have to get your parking validated at that parking when you use that parking spot. So we cannot assume that parking is going to be there all the time for people who need it for whatever reason. So I'm concerned about us including that in our study from a needs perspective. I understand including it because it is downtown parking, but it's not municipal parking, and our focus should be on what we have and what we need to provide from a long-term perspective, in my opinion. Councillor Davoli, I agree with you about when we had a business, you park as far away from the door as possible, but when there are multiple businesses along a road, when you're leaving spots, unless everybody else is playing by the same rules, you might be leaving spots for your neighbor to park their car there all day long. So I think the only solution to that is limiting the time that you can park there, so that way it keeps people honest instead of asking them to be honest. But I agree, if everybody did the right thing, we wouldn't have a problem when it comes to that. The why for the enforcement on the private property that Member Rady mentioned, I think that's an important issue to take. Do we want to take on that added responsibility? The why might be because it would prevent us from having to provide additional parking. But then again, we have to ask the question, why do we need to provide additional parking? Is it because somebody is falling short in their responsibilities? And that's where I have concerns about the cash in lieu, because the cash in lieu does not solve a problem. It takes money in, but we need to look at any future development. Is each of these developments meeting their requirements for parking? And if they aren't, what are we doing from a municipal perspective to ensure that there is parking for those residents and for everybody else who needs parking. And that might be a special assessment. So we can't keep the OMB, for example, or the OLT from making decisions that might allow for 1 unit per, or 1 spot per unit. But at the same time, we have assessment abilities as a municipality where we can put a special assessment on these properties that says, you're not providing parking, and that's what the OLT allowed you to do, but we know that you require parking. And we know that the people who live in that building are going to use up X number of spots, and we're going to have to build additional parking to do that. That means that that building gets a special assessment. And that might be the way that we tackle that in the future. I'd like you to look at that, the legalities of that. I know that our director of planning mentioned that as a solution that has been used in other municipalities where people didn't meet the parking needs, but they were given a special assessment on that site. So something to consider. I love the idea of bike racks. I think that, you know, especially for the 8 months of the year where people ride bikes a lot, and then, you know, there are those hardcore bike users that will use it all year long, and I think that we want to give them the opportunity to do that. Now, going to Grimsby on the Lake, the town, you mentioned the town doesn't have the authority to deal with it because it's private, but I can tell you, having been on the planning committee when those decisions were being made, there were promises made about the way that that parking was going to be shared that are not being fulfilled in the actual now. So those, and my question to you and to, you know, our bylaw enforcement staff and our planning staff is, can the condo board change what's in a site plan? Because the site plans were pretty clear about the parking behind those buildings being flexible so that during the daytime, you know, the argument was during the daytime they're used by the businesses, and at night when people come home from work, they're used for a second spot or for visitor parking by the people that are living there. And that is not in practice what is happening down there. The condo board is making decisions where they're assigning parking spots to individuals, where they're assigning parking spots to businesses that are not in keeping with what we passed as a council back in those days and what we were told by the developer was going to happen. So I don't know if that's legal. I'm asking you to explore it. Can they make changes once it's approved to that? And if you have the answer to that. So there's a lot, if you want to answer any of those, I'd appreciate it.
Sorry, through to you, Mr. Chair. So my understanding is no, the site plan can't be changed. So whatever's written in that site plan agreement and that would transfer with the land, they couldn't make those changes without making a site plan amendment through the town. More of a planning question, but I think I answered that appropriately. My understanding is part of what is happening there is there's been some maybe confusion added by the type of signs that have been installed there. I believe they've made some changes to the sign which reflect what the site plan agreement says, but those signs as they are noted may be confusing. So that was something that we would look at through this process as well as can there be some clarity added as part of the process. In terms of, you know, the town getting involved in a private matter, you know, there's benefits to that and that, you know, we could help hopefully solve some of the concerns, act as a bit of a mediator, I guess, as an enforcer. The opportunity to, with those, obviously if there's people breaking the law, you know, there's revenue collected through that and you know, there's potential there to help fund some of those positions. Not that that's what our goal is, but obviously that plays into that decision. So did you want to?
To you, Mr. Chair, just to add on to that situation there, one of the issues that was found and why, like for example, private enforcement or assistance in enforcement was suggested is because there was issues with the signage that was put up. That has been somewhat resolved, but ultimately, if there's no enforcement of the way it is supposed to be used, For example, if there's a visitor space, it's only supposed to be occupied for an hour, but someone chooses to be there for 2 hours. If the condo board is not enforcing that, then it becomes a problem. So it could be you could have a situation where the spaces are allocated properly and are available for the proper purposes, but if people are still illegally parking, there's no mechanism to free up those spaces and to allow for turnover. And sorry, I just was going to provide one comment too about the private lots data in the downtown area. One of the main reasons why we wanted to ensure that that data was there was to just get an overall sense of what's happening in certain situations. Is there bleed over from the municipal supply into the private side, and is that something that we have to address? Because if there is a bleed over effect, it's the town's responsibility to step in to ensure that there's proper municipal parking. And as we can see, it's currently not that case, but we wanted to make sure that we looked at that in different situations, such as farmers market, where we're taking away that municipal supply.
Just to add to, again, that the fact that the public may be using those parking spaces, there may be an opportunity for the town to work with those landowners to recognize that and to partner with those businesses or those landowners to provide additional capacity, with the understanding that that land could be redeveloped in the future, but as it stands, we've secured those parking spaces for public use for a certain duration. So it's something that we would explore in phase 2.
Yeah, so just a couple of the questions. So as far as the bleed over is concerned, I think that the people who are using those spots are just fortunate that it hasn't gotten to a point where they're enforcing, because, anything that's in that northeast part of the Food Basics parking lot, for example, is not being used by people on that site. It's being used for people going other places. And it's pretty clear to see which spots are not being used by the people who are using those businesses there. I would encourage staff to look at the site plans for the Lake House development and to make sure that the rules are being followed in the way that it was approved. Because we've had agreements in other places, like in Aqua Blue and Aqua Azul, for example, where the parking that is around the commercial is meant to be flexible, because there was all that additional parking that was allowed next to the MTO land, because you can't count that parking. But if the condo board starts selling off those parking lots for spots, for example, or something like that, that would be a cause for concern. There's a site plan, and we want to make sure that that's adhered to in the long term. And so that brings me to the discussion of long term, and I hope that in this parking study, there is a projection, there is a look in the long term about what could happen in the downtown, what potentially could happen, and what the solutions will be to that. I was concerned when I saw the Grimsby on the Lake one, for example, that it includes the built area, but it doesn't include the areas that will be built. Like, so for example, the Fifth Wheel site, which is currently under construction, is not part of this plan. And I know that it's because there's no parking there right now, but there is a loss, for example, of town parking there, because there was a large town parking lot that is not there anymore, because it's now that parcel of land's been sold as part of the development. There'll be additional parking because there'll be street parking by the water, but looking at that and looking at the long-term needs in Grimsby on the Lake is something that I'd like to see. And I know that these are projections, but these are consultants who do this type of thing all the time. So being able to address those long-term concerns, I think, is an important part of what we're doing here, because otherwise we're putting out fires instead of trying to prevent fires. And I really want this to be something that solves problems in the future rather than looking back and addressing problems that already exist. Yes, we have to address problems that already exist, but we need to look forward and say, these are things that we know are going to happen. If this happens, this is what's going to happen, and how are we going to deal with it? So I hope that that's the next stage. And you might want, you're nodding, maybe you want to talk about that just briefly. And I apologize for going on, but there are things that I had written down.
No, to you, Mr. Chair. That's exactly what's going to be occurring in the second phase here. The first phase was existing. What are we working with? And then the second phase is how can we take that into the future? So our consultant will be doing future projections based on current applications that we have, any developable land that has potential, and the goal is what type of parking management strategy can we put in place that will manage this supply for the foreseeable future, and how will we manage all of that additional growth that happens in both of these areas.
Thank you. Councillor Howe?
Through you, Chair. Just to clarify, you've referred to the privately owned lots. Is that just the 3 that were mentioned? I thought there were a couple over on the north side. Sorry.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. So there are some, yes, you're correct, on the north side of the north parking lot, if we want to call it. They've captured those as basically a municipal parking supply. But we understand that there's existing agreements in there, and I think the detail is in the report in terms of how we describe that, but generally in this map, it's basically lumped all together. And they've looked at, even municipal lots, further away, the Grimsby Library, Lions Pool, et cetera. So it's as well as Domino's is on there as well, so.
Michael, did you?
Sorry, I was just, through Mr. Chair, I was just going to add on to what Brandon was saying there. In the actual, in the full report, there's more detail regarding how those lots are broken down and the usage on them. So it wasn't presented in here, but all of that is being taken into account when.
If I can. Elephant in the room, we're talking about parking, and we're going to, I think it's next week, where we've got a meeting to do with the Wolverton downtown.
Yeah.
And until we figure that out, is that not going to have the potential to really skew our observations and our responses to it?
Mr. Wortman, did you?
Sorry, I'm not sure what the status of that is in terms of public knowledge, so I'm hesitant on answering the question. Sorry.
I got a notification in the mail today of a meeting here in the chambers.
Public meeting?
Yep. Okay, and there's just roughly, but it is, I guess I'm trying to look into the crystal ball a little bit, and if it's going to mess things up a little bit, in some of our calculations, so be it, but we'll have to see what comes of that. The other part, and something that was, I think, mentioned once or maybe twice in here, is the parking garage. Okay? Have we ever put a price against the parking garage? Just roughly, no, it doesn't have to be specific.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we don't have any any numbers generated yet. It has been an idea that's been thrown around, but based on the data that we've collected, it hasn't been something that's been carried forward as needing more investigation at this point in time.
Any other questions or comments from members of the committee? All right. Good discussion, folks, and great questions by everybody. I have a resolution moved by Member Spink, seconded by Councillor Davoli. Resolved that report TPW 2325 Strategic Parking Management Study Phase 1 update dated October 30th, 2023 be received for information. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Next, we have a piece of correspondence on the request for a street name change. Is there any discussion on this? Mr. Wortman?
Yeah, thank you. It's just a quick, I guess, touch point with the committee. So we did receive a letter from the local branch of the Royal Canadian Legion asking the town to consider renaming Clark Street to Veterans Way. The letter also requests that the Legion be permitted to display banners of the local veterans on street or utility poles on the roadway. Understand the matter was discussed as through the Grimsby Heritage Committee, who in turn has provided their support for the name change. Basically, we've prepared a resolution here asking basically council to direct staff to do a further review and bring back some information to council with some thoughts on the request. Given it's a regional roadway, it does have to go through the region, so I understand our process would be reviewing it internally to see if we, if there's any comments or concerns with that, providing our recommendations to council, and if council was in support, it would then go to the Regional Public Works for their consideration. Just one of the one item that I think we need to flesh out a little bit more is the request for the banners. We just need to have an understanding of some of the logistics behind that. Who's installing them, how are they being maintained, how long are they displayed, that kind of stuff. So something that we'll certainly follow up and come back to council with some more information.
Councillor Howe?
Through you, Chair. Director Workman, I have the banners that has just stuck on me in the conversation. Small town Ontario has picked up on it. Hensel, Ontario, and Embro, Ontario, for instance, and too small. But you get in there and it is a stirring. I mean, it's really something to see. To see those banners fluttering. Are they big and ostentatious? Absolutely not. They're well done. Unless you're standing right there, you're not going to read it, the names, but it really sends a message that you'd be proud of. And I know if we had them down there, I'd be darn proud of it too. Thank you.
Member Spink?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Just more of a general question, not specifically about this street. I just wondered if the town has a street naming policy or street name changing policy that I know there sometimes can be an impact with the change of a street name on the local businesses, for example, in terms of all of their course, their stationery and all of that type of thing. I just don't know if there is a policy.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, we don't currently have a street renaming policy. I believe we have naming conventions through our planning department. One of the items that we're looking at creating through our transportation master plan and potentially the official plan, we're just trying to figure out where is the most appropriate place is a policy to deal with street renaming requests. They do come up from time to time, and so it's important that we have a set policy on how we address those. So I think that's a very good point, something we'll be looking at in the future.
Yeah, that was a question I asked at Heritage, Member Spink. I asked the same question because it does have an impact on, people's mailing address, what I was told by our Heritage staff was that they were looking at the portion of the street that was just closest to the Legion. So if that is what they're talking about, then it doesn't impact, because our Public Works building is on Clark Street. It would have an impact on other buildings if you were to do all of Clark Street, but if it's just that portion, there's also finding issues that come as a result of it. There, emergency vehicle concerns. There are other things that, of course, Mr. Wortman and staff will probably be mentioning when we deal with this in their report. But this is just to have them explore it and come back to us with what they find. So any other questions or comments for members of the committee? I need a mover and a seconder, please, to move this request forward. Councillor Howe and Councillor Cristangi. Moved by Councillor Haug, seconded by Councillor Cristangi. Resolved that Public Works Committee recommend council give staff direction to review the request for street name change in veterans banners as outlined in the letter of October 1st, 2023, and provide a report back to the Public Works Committee with further information and recommendations. All in favor? That's carried. Is there any other business pertaining to the committee? Member Rady?
I'd like to take this moment to congratulate and wish our member Smink a happy 29th birthday today. She's over 29, she said, and she found 30 really tough, but we would like to thank you for spending your birthday with us. Thank you very much. Congratulations.
Your gift is we kept it as short as possible. Is there any other new business? This was an important one, though. The parking one is an important one. We were talking about the Legion. I will be co-hosting a trivia night, if people are interested in trivia, at the Legion on November 10th to raise money for the Poppy Fund. The history teacher and me is going to come out that night. So it'll be November 10th in the evening, and you find stuff on the social media for the Legion. Seeing no other new business, our next meeting is scheduled for November 27th, 2023 at 6:30 p.m. Meeting's adjourned. Thanks, everybody, and thanks, staff.